IBM that you came to IBM. So she, over to you, Professor Beatriz.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us here too. It's very nice to meet you all. First, I prefer my talk with slides. Let's see. Don't let me go too fast. If I'm going too fast, please stop me. People that look can be properly slides.
Excuse me, Danish, can you use some collar mic to Beatriz so that we can hear her properly?
Maybe I can speak louder also.
Yeah, maybe.
You could use the mic. So is it better like this?
Yeah, it is better like this.
Okay. So I'm going to continue with the topic, but this will be a little bit different approach. I'm going to talk about some geometrical and algebraic aspects of the steady state varieties that I was presenting to you in the last lectures. And it's not working out. Yeah. So first, let me introduce you to two topics that I plan to talk about. If I don't have time, then I will stop whenever I have to, but the plan is to present two problems. The first problem, we have a polynomial system and polynomials, nonlinear polynomials in n variables with parameters, which is coming from a reaction network. So it has a structure that we saw in the former lectures. It has a fixed support. The monomials are fixed by the reactants, and then each monomial comes with its own parameter. And the question is, if they are linearly independent, if I don't need to remove any of them, is there a finite number of solutions? Complex, positive, real, whatever we're interested in. So if the system was linear, if they were linear polynomials and they were linearly independent, we would know there is only one solution, right? But if they are not linear, then this is not so clear. Well, if they are not linearly independent, of course, we could just stick to S linearly independent of them, just as we did.
Wait, Beatriz, do you mean algebraically independent? Or
No, I mean linearly independent.
just linear?
Because this is what I'm removing. If you remember, so I remove rows of the stoichiometric matrix. So this gives linear independence. So of course, I don't know if they are algebraically independent. But there is the parameters there playing a role, right? So it's kind of special situation. So if I have S linearly independent equation in polynomial equations in in n variables, does the number of equations give me the codimension here? That is the question. Is that true for any K? It's not true for all K. So there are examples of networks where it still can happen that the equations are algebraically dependent. And then, so this is one of those examples. I don't expect you to do all the computations, but the slides are there for you, so you can go back to them. Just trust me for now, this is the system that you get. And if you, for instance, choose all the K's to be 1, then this is a set of equations. And the solution set of these equations is a curve. So I have 3 linearly independent equations, 3 variables, and I get a curve. So it's not true for all K. But is it true for most K's? Is it generically true? That would be the most interesting question. In general, it does not happen for nonlinear polynomials with parameters in the coefficients. It does not need to be true. But our polynomials are not any polynomials. Even if they're not linear, they are kind of special. And one can prove that they behave as expected in dimensions terms, as long as one does not have too many singular points. So singular points will be the key. I'm being a bit back here, but I will go deep into the precise result later. So this is just the presentation of the problem. But yeah, that's I'm consciously choosing to be back here. The second problem, again, polynomial system coming from reaction networks, S of them are linearly independent. If I fix one reaction rate, can I find one of the variables which always takes the same value at all solutions? Is there a fixed value for one of the variables at all positive steady states? Actually, I'm interested in the positives. This is the most important part. And this problem appeared already in the research project proposal. And yesterday, I mentioned it because Imran asked about one of the examples that was there. And if I don't fix the rates, so for a given network and its polynomials, can it happen that there is a variable that always has a fixed value, maybe depending on the rates? So it is independent of the rate that it has a fixed value, but the value depends on rates. So is the problem understood? I will go to an example. Anyway, otherwise we cannot see it. So this is my example. Some biology here. I'll do what I can. So there is this enzyme that I call IDH because it has a very long name that I will not try to pronounce. And this is the green body there, which is in charge of regulating the flow of carbon between two different processes that take place in some unicellular organisms, some bacteria and fungus, so on. So they have the Krebs cycle, where they get the energy from. And they also have this bypass that uses a carbon too, but to build the membrane of the cell. So if all the carbon goes to the Krebs cycle, then the cell does not grow. Now, depending on how much carbon, how it's distributed, how it's available, we need this enzyme to make sure that the right flow goes. And this enzyme sometimes gets a phosphate group attached, and then it becomes inactive, and this will be the red person there. So green is my active enzyme. Red is my phosphorylated inactive enzyme. And I'm not interested in the regulation of the carbon, but I'm interested in the interaction between this enzyme and the enzyme, the K blue enzyme, which is the one that helps the other one to get the phosphate group and lose it whenever this is needed. So there is this mechanism of phosphorylation and dephosphorylation that happens in many other processes. And in this case, so when the inactive enzyme meets the K, then through some intermediate process, it gets rid of the phosphate group and it becomes active. And the other way around, when some of the intermediate species meets the active one, then it eventually becomes inactive. So this is one example of reaction network. And I will change the names just to be able to write the variables, but I keep the colors so that everyone knows. Green is the active enzyme, red is the inactive enzyme, and blue is the one that helps. The other ones, I'm not so interested, so I just get them same color. So this is the example that appeared yesterday. And I told you to, as an exercise, to compute the equations. If you didn't, just cover them, don't look at them. I gave you the solution, the parameterization already. And Imran said yesterday, why is that not depending on the case? Well, because it does satisfy this problem. Well, it depends on the case, sorry, but it's not depending on the X. So for any K, the solutions, the positive solutions to the system can be written like this, and then the variable corresponding to the active enzyme always takes the same value. So it does not depend on the initial condition. It does not depend on whether there is a perturbation. Whenever there is a steady state, there will be a fixed value for that enzyme. So this means it is a very robust system for the enzyme. It needs to have a value, a concentration, and it will keep it, no matter how the ambient affects. So it will go out of equilibrium, but when it returns, we'll get the right value. Yeah, so this is my example. And I will start with this second problem, because the explanation was a bit more complex, I think. So this property is called absolute concentration robustness. It means it's very robust in the concentration. And yeah, for this example, I said all of this already, so I'm gonna go very fast. In a paper in Science in 2010, Schindler and Feinberg called this property ACR. So we say that a mass action system has ACR in a species if the variable corresponding to the species takes a fixed value at all positive steady state. Of course, one can also think of the network, and then it would be a network has ACR if for all case, or maybe we're interested in for some case, it has this property. That's up to you. By the way, all the references will be in the last slide. So the last, I don't know, 7 slides are just references from this lecture and from all the former lectures. Yeah, so the question is, can we detect by the graph whether a network or some systems have ACR? Any questions, you know? Okay, I go with small examples. This is our first example from the first lecture. And we got the equations and we realized that one of them was minus the other, and we have a half line of positive steady states. And for all positive steady states, XA takes the same value. Just XB varies, but XA takes the same value. And one can also guess this just by looking at the, by looking at the equation, because this factor here does not give us any positive solution, and we have a polynomial that is of the form XA minus a constant equals 0. If we remove this other factor. Another example. This one appeared also, I don't know if the second or the third. In this case, we can reduce to one polynomial, but this one has 2 factors which don't contribute any positive solutions, and one that might contribute depending on the discriminant. So for instance, with these values, I think I gave you this example with these numbers already. I have 2 possible values. So this does not have ACR. Well, not for these values, but for some values of the discriminant. But if the discriminant is 0, then yeah, there will be only one positive solution. So here it's a bit more complicated to see. But of course, we cannot always inspect by eye because not all reaction networks are smaller. This is a real example taken from a database that one can find called ODE base, where people upload their networks with all the data. And this one has 86 variables, so 86 species, 301 reactions, so 301 monomials. I only copied a few of them, but you can already see it's very big. So this could be a problem even from computing a Grosvenor basis or something. It's, of course, far too difficult. So let's try to understand the property from a different view. I wrote it again. Geometrically, well, if the system has ACR, it means the positive steady state variety is contained in a hyperplane that is parallel to a coordinate plane. That's what it means. It's restricted to a hyperplane. I will use this notation, so I will write F for the ideal generated by the Fs, or maybe by enough Fs if I remove linearly dependent ones. And then the set of positive steady states is contained in the set of the real steady states, which is itself contained in the complex variety. And if I should try an algebraic test, this as I saw in the examples, well, I could think, if I find a polynomial like this in the ideal, just xi minus a constant, then I know that all points satisfy, all complex real everything satisfies this equation. But the converse is not true, because I still have.
Excuse me, Beatriz, how you are selecting this C?
I don't know the C. If there is a C,
Okay,
such that this holds, exactly, that would be finding the ACR value.
so
And I don't know how to do
by
that.
xi minus c, you mean the maximal ideal?
No, I mean, if I look in my ideal and I manage to find a polynomial that is of the form one variable minus a constant,
Mhm.
well, then I know that this variable always takes the value of this constant for all points in the variety.
So you are
The
just
complex
fixing one variable, right?
Yes. Yes, to determine if there is ACR in that species.
Mhm. So fixing one variable, then you are checking the linear independence of the polynomial over the remaining one, or this is something else?
It's something else. I mean, I'm not saying how I do it. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to find a polynomial. If I look at the ideal and I happen to find a polynomial of this sort, if I can find a Grosvenor basis, for instance,
Okay.
and it gives me back one polynomial like this, then I know
Mhm.
that this happens, right? I think I have an example here. Yeah, so if we look at the ideal and there is such a polynomial, then we are lucky. We have found ACR. But of course, as you say, it's not completely clear how to do it, how to find such a polynomial, even if it exists. And there can still be ACR, even if there is not such a polynomial, because one could always have something like in the first example, like such a polynomial times something that does not steady state, right? So even if I knew how to find it, that would not be enough. Even more complicated case, here is not a matter of a product. So I have two polynomials here that I can factor. And the first one gives me positive solutions with x3 equal 1. And the other one gives me some other positive solutions. But the second polynomial, in order to vanish the positive points, all those positive points need to satisfy x3 equal 1. And I will not find the polynomial x3 minus 1 in my ideal. So this like very obvious algebraic test is not that easy to perform. So my point with these examples is that it's not easy to determine whether a network has ATR. I hope I convince you. However, in this last example, something happens, and it is that all the positive steady states are degenerate points, are actually singular points of the variety. So the degenerate here, I think I didn't say yesterday, but the points where the Jacobian vanishes or does not have maximum rank, I call them degenerate.
Beatriz, excuse me. Can you repeat how this the generators of the ideal I is coming from the above system?
In the above system, I just I had to remove one of the polynomials.
One of the variable or polynomial?
One of the polynomials. I'm not sure if it's direct, to be honest. Again, I computed it some time ago. I don't know, maybe finding from the basis you can get this and then factor them out. So this was an example that was doable. But I don't know if it is just two of these two polynomials factored somehow. I don't know. I can look at this later, maybe and let you know. But it doesn't matter because in general you will not be able to. Just
Okay.
Yeah. So what would I do if I wanted to know whether a network has ACR? So it is possible that such a polynomial is not in the ideal, and still all positive real solutions have a fixed value for it. I hope I convinced you. Yes. Because we could have, for instance, a power. That would go away if we compute the radical. So if we, instead of the ideal generated by f, consider the radical, then we would get rid of this problem. But there would still be the problem that we're only looking at real solutions. And not all complex solutions need to necessarily satisfy all the equations that real solutions do. So that is a problem. That could happen. So if we wanted to use the ideal membership as a test to decide whether a condition is satisfied for my solutions, we would need something like the positive real radical. And some works are working in going in that direction. I will give you some of these references, but it's not an obvious thing to do. And computationally, it's also very expensive. So maybe we try to be more creative. This again, the same, but I want to make sure that you're following my line of thought. So if I find some polynomial like this, there is ACR. If there is a polynomial such that it is a product of a polynomial like this and something that does not contribute positive solutions, I have ACR. If there is some polynomials whose only real solutions satisfy something like this, yeah, but I said this cannot be guaranteed for the complex, even if it happens on the reals. Well, there is a case in which it can be. The case in which my ideal is prime. And I can find a point that is real. Let's say positive to make sure that there is something, which is non-singular. So if I can find a non-singular positive point in my variety, then all the complex points satisfy all the polynomials the polynomial equations that satisfy the real points. This is something I can use. Is there a question? So this is one thing that I can use. This you can find in the real algebra geometry book. So the point for my next result, I will show you one result, will be that if I can find in an irreducible variety a non-singular real point, then all the complex points satisfy all the equations that the real satisfy. So if we could find, in general, the minimal associated primes, so look at all irreducible components, maybe only those that actually intersect the positive ordinals, because the other were not so interested. And we could do this check. Then we should be able to find, if there is ACR, there would be a polynomial of the form xi minus c in each of these associated primes. The problem is we want to know this without knowing the parameters. So we should be able to compute the composition, like find the associated primes with polynomials which have parameters, maybe many parameters, maybe 301 parameters. So the question is, how can we determine this for all the cases? At least for all the cases that give some positive steady state. There are many things to remove here. There's a lot of noise. And there are many works working in this direction. There is not a canonical way to approach this problem. In this first paper that I mentioned before, Schiner and Feinberg authored a criterion that looks at the connected components and at some of the complexes and look at the relation of the complexes in the connected components. And in some cases, they can determine, and they do for some networks. For instance, for the one on the enzymes that I showed you before, they can determine ACR. This last work here, I mentioned it already. They try to look at this real version of the radical in some way. They do some creative work to avoid the problems and the computational difficulties. In this work, they look at small rank reaction networks, and they classify all of them depending on graphical conditions, on how arrows point from one complex to the other. But this is just different approaches that people have taken. There are many others. And I'm gonna just show you one theorem that we got with Ellis and Mafeliu a couple of years ago, very fast. So if I look at the family arising from a reaction network, and I have this system of polynomial, I take all the linearly independent ones, and I look at the irreducible components of the positive, sorry, of the, yeah, of the variety, of the irreducible components of the variety, which actually intersect the positive order, because those are the ones that I'm interested in. If I could do that, theoretically, I could. And I consider all the values such that there is a non-degenerate point in each irreducible component. Then I would guarantee there for ACR, I need that there is a polynomial of the form xi minus c in the ideal, at least in the intersection of those ideals. Is that clear? Does this make sense?
Excuse me, Beatriz, but how, can I ask how you are determining the components here by looking at the graph or the matrix?
I am not. I am not. I'm just using the theoretical
Theoretical aspect. Okay. Okay.
idea that this should happen.
Yeah.
And then
okay.
I'm going to give you a linear algebra criterion to decide
Okay. Okay.
whether, yeah. Yeah, it would be very difficult. I agree. So one, the theorem is more general, but I'm going to give you this reduced expression. If you're interested, you can ask me. So we determined that it's a necessary condition for having ACR with respect to some species, at least for all the case such that the conditions above are satisfied, which is the case in which I can say something. For the case for which there is some irreducible component that does not have any non-degenerate point, so all points are degenerate, it's a multiple component, or it's a higher dimensional component, or all the real points are singular. These kind of cases I cannot determine. But for all cases which are not like that, then it is necessary for ACR that when I look at the matrix given like this, so this is my gamma from yesterday, and this looks a lot to the convex parameters that I showed yesterday, where I was putting here some parameters as many as R, and then the transpose came from the Jacobian, and then I had another diagonal matrix here for the X, which was like X minus 1. Well, this last part does not matter here, but if I compute this, that actually comes from the Jacobian. Well, they should have maximal rank in order for this condition to be satisfied. But if I remove the column corresponding to I of this matrix, the rank will drop. This will tell me that there is a polynomial in the ideal of the form xi minus 2. And this is a very easy computation to do. And the key here is, well, this parameterization that is very similar to the one I showed yesterday. I will not stop much. If you're interested, I can show you the details later, but I just want to show the picture. And the proposition that I saw before about the existence of non-singular real points.
Excuse me,
next.
Beatriz, excuse me.
Yeah.
How these two kernels are related to each other? The kernel of gamma prime and gamma?
Yes, because gamma prime, it is just a reduced version of gamma with less rows. So those rows are linearly dependent on the others.
But
Yeah.
in gamma, you are creating a column of zeros, right?
Not of zero. So gamma is the original stoichiometric matrix that has one row per species, one column per reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And gamma prime is what I get when I remove all the rows that are linearly dependent, and I stay with the matrix that is.
I was just curious, when you are taking these S cross S minors, so you are already excluding the column I?
No. Well, for this, yes. If
Yes,
I
okay.
all the minors of the reduced matrix, so the reduced matrix without excluding the columns would have rank S. But
Okay.
if I remove the column I and I have ACR, then it will get rank S minus 1.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
a
Thank you.
question. I will show you in an example. So this is the example from before. This is my gamma after I remove two linearly dependent rows. And this is my B. And I can parameterize the kernel of this matrix. It has dimension 3. So any element there will be a linear combination of these 3. So I can parameterize it like this. And then I can write this matrix that I gave you before in terms of A1 and 2, A3. It's just plugging in gamma prime times these vectors in a diagonal matrix, and then this transpose. If I compute the matrix, then it has rank 3 in general. But when I remove this column, so column 4 is crucial for this rank because otherwise it automatically has rank 2. So this means that variable x4 has ACF. It does not mean, but it's necessary for it. It means something wicked that I will not go into. Any questions?
How you are constructing the last matrix? Can
So
you
the
repeat
last
it again?
It is a matrix from the theorem. So I'm taking the reduced version of the stoichiometric matrix, where I remove linearly dependent rows. This is the first thing. Then I need to consider the product with a diagonal matrix, where I have a vector in the kernel of this matrix. So I am parameterizing those vectors as x. I don't know if you can see where I am.
Okay.
So I am parameterizing vectors in the kernel by 3 values, A. Yeah, and then multiply by the transpose of B. This is what the theorem says. And then initially it has rank 3, but when I remove the 4th column, it has rank 2. It becomes 3 times 4 instead of 3 times 5, and the rank drops to 2. Is it clear now?
Yeah.
It might be a bit too fast. I don't know. Just let me know if you need more time. You can also download the slides if you want to look at them in your laptop, because I uploaded yesterday for this, because some people told me you sometimes want to go back to the definitions. So they are available for you. So this was the first problem. And this is one of the results, the one that I work in, but I show you some other references, and there are many approaches, and the problem in general is not solved. So any ideas are welcome. The other problem was about the dimension. And I can think of the dimension of the complex varieties. I'm interested in that. If I'm looking at networks, I will be interested in the positive part of that. So I remind you the structure of our polynomials is the same. So this first is a system where I have removed all the linearly dependent rows. So that would be the system defining my positive steady-state variety. And it depends on the case. And the system below it is what I get when I add this conservation loss that I was talking about in my second lecture. So for this, if I have rank S, I will need n minus s new parameters to parameterize all the different stoichiometric compatibility classes, depending on the initial condition. Yeah, everybody remembers this? Any questions? Should I refresh something?
No question from answer.
I'm just taking a matrix of conservation loss as I constructed them. So I get an n times n system now. It is n variables and equations. N minus s of them are linear and s of them are nonlinear. Yeah, this is exactly what I said. And the good thing, or the special thing of my first system, is that it has fixed support with parametric coefficients. It is not really what you would call a sparse system because the parameters are not free. But even if they are not free, every parameter appears only together with the same monomial. So they can appear in different equations, but they will only be with the same monomial all the time. So there is some dependency there, but not random dependency. Yeah, this is what I was just saying. And then I want to look at the positive solutions of both systems. The first one gives me the positive steady state variety. The second one gives me the set of positive steady states in a precise stoichiometric compatibility class. And this is what I write, like it's a dependent thing on K and T. And yesterday we were talking about whether there are more than one points in this intersections, right? So now I want to know whether there are finitely many. I'm concerned about the dimension. And I will look at these things by thinking of the complex variety, because this is how I think best, and then I intersect with the positive objects. In fact, we do, so I will talk to you about some results that we got with Edison Tafelio also and Oscar Henriksson, and we do other computations on the complex terms because the zeros are actually a problem and mess everything up, but complex still help us. So let me show some examples. First example, this network, I'm not sure if it appeared maybe in some of the problems. It has 4 variables. Then I have 4 polynomials, but it has rank 3. So I can remove one of these polynomials and I can add one conservation law. And I want to understand which of the following things can happen. Assuming first that the rank of the system is the maximum. So I don't have any conservation loss. So the stoichiometric subspace is all of Rn. I would have a square nonlinear polynomial system. So the first polynomials would be n linearly independent polynomials and n variables. And I want to know whether it is possible that the set of solutions has dimension greater than 0, whether I can have infinitely many solutions. Actually, infinitely many positive solutions in the end. Also, I want to know if the rank is S, then do I have, can I have, so if the rank is S, I forgot to say less than N, maybe, can I have infinitely many solutions in its positive steady state, in its positive stoichiometric compatibility class? So can I have a full curve of things, positive things inside of one of these linear translates of the stoichiometric subspace? In general, can there be too many positive steady states in this sense of too many? And also I'm concerned about whether it can happen that all positive steady states are degenerate points. In part because it would affect my former theorem. If they are, then I cannot use it. But also it affects other questions in this research area. So that would mean that the Jacobian of the system of a full system, this is the one that I parameterized yesterday, is does not have full rank, is singular for all points at some of these stoichiometric compatibility classes. And it can happen. So these things can happen for some systems for certain values of the parameters. If I fix some value of the parameters, I can find examples. This is the first system that I showed before in the introduction. And I told you already, it has infinitely many points, even if it's square to begin with. This other system is not square, so it has 2 variables. Then I have 2 nonlinear polynomials, but one of them is a multiple of the other, so I can remove it. I add one conservation law. And then I can find still some parameter values. So I fix T. I choose one stoichiometric class, I fix T, and then I take for case 1, 1T. Then this system as a whole curve of equation of points given by x1 plus x2 equals T. So I can somehow work examples where these things happen. About the degeneracy, this can also happen that all points at the certain stoichiometric class are degenerate. In the system, if I take for k 1, 1, 1, I get this equation, and it's telling me that yeah, this Jacobian, the Jacobian of this will vanish with all points because all points are doubled. Jacobian is singular at all of them. So yes, sure, for some values it can happen. And not only for one value, for a whole variety of parameter space, a whole closed subset. So of course, it can happen for some values. I want to know if they can happen for most values. Can it happen generically? Or this will be just only in closed regions of parameter space? That will be the next question. And in general, this gets better. So for one of the examples that I showed before, there were infinitely many positive zeros here, but outside of big enough set of parameter space, I say that it has non-empty Euclidean interior. You can take this outside, so in the complement of a Zariski closed subset, this will not happen. And the same thing for this one. So in this one, I have infinitely many positive zeros for some values of the case. It's a square system, so I'm not looking at compatibility classes, but I will still have infinitely many solutions for some values, but it's a closed subset of parameter space. The problem is that generically, outside of this subset, there's no positive steady states at all. And I told you to study these things, we looked at the complex torus first, and then we restrict to the positive portent. And we consider these two systems the same for annotation, but I'm thinking I might skip the general case. Yeah, I will skip the general case and I will show you only. The slides are online, so you can look at the general case if you want. I will show you the theorem for the square system. So maybe it's not square, but for the steady state variety. So it is equivalent. I am considering upstairs the set of all Ks such that there is a positive steady state. Okay, so I'm restricting myself to that subset. It is equivalent that I can find some value of K such that there is a non-degenerate zero of this system of polynomials. So a non-singular point that lives in a component of the right dimension and intersects in a single component of the right dimension. If I can find such a K, then the set of parameters for which there are positive steady states is big enough, is Zariski dense. Then also the dimension is what I expect. The codimension is given by the number of equations. And actually, generically, all zeros of the polynomial system are non-degenerate. So it's not only that I have some degenerate ones, but for most parameter values outside of the Zariski closed subset, I get only non-degenerate zeros. So the degeneracy thing is related to the too big dimension and to the maybe for most parameter values. So this will only happen if for most parameter values, there is no positive steady state. So it's not a coincidence. It's all this degenerative are somehow related. And one can prove these things. So actually, I said about the complex variety, maybe in the torus, but this one can allow us to say something about the dimension of the positive part too. So if we know this about the complex, we know this about the positive part too. Other way is not true, but it implies. And actually, we can check instead of trying to find that parameter that has a non-degenerate positive zero, we can check by only finding a parameter in the complex that has a non-degenerate zero in the complex terms. That will be enough. And this is a very easy linear algebra check. That one I can show you later. So my point with this thing is to prove some things in reaction network. You can actually use really stronger tools in geometry, like geometric intuition and comes into play. So my conclusion to the first original problem is that the dimension of the positive part is generically what I expect. So it's given by the number of linearly independent equations. As long as for most parameter values, I do have some positive part. So I don't know if that satisfies your first question, but this is what should happen. Otherwise, all points will be degenerate.
Beatriz, can you describe this Z, this heuristically closed? Or
In the
some-
theorem, we don't construct it. I gave it in some of the examples before.
Mhm.
Maybe I can come back. So
So is there like a general form that you can?
for instance, here.
Mhm.
No, so the theorem is not constructed in that sense. We use dimension of fibers and this kind of things. But for instance, for this example I mentioned, this is the set of parameters where there are infinitely many positive zeros, and then outside. Oh, okay, no, sorry, this is no, sorry, this is an example of the other behavior. No, maybe I didn't write any example of that here.
Okay.
Sorry. But it would be a different question, not necessarily easy. Actually, I need to think about it.
Okay.
Let me answer you later. So I was here. Yeah, I was here. And I wanted to tell you that one can also answer equivalent questions for the system with the conservation laws that talks about whether there can be infinitely many positive steady state in a given stoichiometric class. I will not go through it because it is the same ideas. And you have it in the slides, but I will show you some motivation. I will show you now some motivation for it with examples. But first, let me tell you that we are actually using the structure of the polynomials coming from reaction network very strongly. Because if our system was not like this, if the same parameter could appear with different monomials, then this will not hold anymore. So we can find examples of systems that look similar, but for instance, here, K3 comes with this monomial, but also with this monomial, and K1 with this monomial, but also with this monomial. And then this does not happen. The dimension is generically, so the codimension is generically smaller than the number of linearly independent equations. So we are using that particular property of reaction network systems. And if we include the solutions in the coordinate hyperplanes, I told you we were working on the complex torus because the zeros were problematic. If we include the solutions with some zero entries, it also breaks. So these two things are important for this result. And I was telling you, I will give you some examples to motivate these things. So there was in this paper that is among the references, there was this network that I gave you in the first tutorial to work with. And they were asking, so they constructed this network, trying to find a weakly reversible network such that it allowed us to find infinitely many positive steady states in one of the stoichiometric compatibility classes. So that the intersection of the stoichiometric subspace with the steady state variety had infinitely many points. And they managed. They found, for this network, they found values of the case such that there were infinitely many positive steady states. So this one is rank 2, is full rank. So the stoichiometric stoichiometric subspace is the whole R2. So I'm in R2, and I have 2 linearly independent polynomials. And the dimension for these parameter values is 1. They were wondering whether this could happen for weakly reversible networks. I told you yesterday that weakly reversible networks have some special properties. So we can, for instance, state that they always have these steady states. And if we know the deficiency, then we know something about the non-deficiency. So these was their questions. Can it happen for most parameter values or for all parameter values? With the former theorem, you know that this cannot happen because it either happens in a closed subset, or if it happens in most parameter values that actually give positive steady states, then the other values will give no positive steady states at all. And most of them will be like the same.
Excuse me, Beatriz,
Yes.
can you explain what is the meaning of a non-degenerate steady state when we are viewing it through the dimension of the VK?
Through the dimension. So when I say the generic point, I mean in the variety, it will be either a singular point or it will be in a higher dimensional component.
Mm-hmm.
So this will mean that the Jacobian of the F will be singular. This is what I'm saying. It's a singular point in some sense, in the sense of schemes, if you want. Yeah, this is when I say non-degenerate point or degenerate point. When I say non-degenerate steady state, I'm talking about the full system when I add the conservation loss.
Mm-hmm.
So the degenerate point would be a point that is in the steady state variety, and it is either a singular point of the steady state variety, or it is in a higher dimensional component, or it could also happen that it is just a regular point in the steady state variety, but it intersects the stoichiometric subspace non-transversally. Yeah, so it's tangent to the stoichiometric subspace. That will also make it into a degenerate steady state.
And one more question. I was just curious. This is a naive question in this particular theory. So you are changing the values for the K, and definitely the dimension is depending on this assumption of K. So if someone assume other values of K, so KIs, so the dimension of VK will vary.
So it depends on the network. So what the theorem says, it's generically the dimension would be the right one. So unless we stay in a closed Zariski subset of parameter state, of parameter space, the dimension will be the one we expect. So we must be very unlucky to get inside of this measure theory. Measure zero subset.
So does it relate with the existence of generate and degenerate steady states when we change the values of K?
So we can have degenerate steady states or not, depending on whether we change the value. Yeah, I don't know if that's the question, but there is one of the, so if you think of one of the examples that I showed you that was 2 lines, and probably you have it written somewhere because it appeared 2 lectures ago, I think, or last lecture.
Okay.
So it was 2 lines, and they depended on the discriminant
Okay, okay.
When the discriminant is 0, you get only one line, but it's a double line. So all the steady states will be degenerate.
Okay, okay.
So for specific values of the K, those that make the discriminant vanish, you will only have degenerate steady states. Is that the kind of answer you were looking for?
Beatriz,
Yes.
you must have said this, but I missed it. What does this degenerate steady state means in terms of the system itself? What does it tell me about the system?
I'm not completely sure about this, but I think it gives rise to some behavior, like in the dynamics, you can have bifurcations or something like this. I don't know if that is your question. You mean with respect to the dynamical system?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Or
the behavior are
about the network itself. I mean, either way. Okay.
So-
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
very precisely, but this is all I can tell you.
Okay. Thank you.
For me, they are singular points in some way in the variety, but yeah, dynamically, they give some trouble. We have 2 minutes, something like this. Yeah, anyway, I think I can almost stop here because the only thing I wanted to tell you is about this former criterion. So together with Felisanda, and this one of the motivations for this last result was whether we can check if there is a non-singular point or a non-degenerate point maybe at each irreducible component. And now we know that we can check it through the hypothesis of this last theorem. And if we can check it, if we can check it in an indirect way, not finding all the irreducible components and trying to find a non-degenerate point, but with the easy check that I mentioned in the last theorem, if we can do this easy check, then we can guarantee that generically there is a non-degenerate point in each irreducible component because all points are non-degenerate. So generically, everything is non-singular. And in that case, we can actually, this is what I was saying. We can actually use the criterion that I told you about when I was talking about the ACR. That is also a linear algebra check. Yeah, so this is all I wanted to say. I have a lot of references here. The first is just a bunch of basic reference for anyone who's interested in learning more about reaction networks. The second block is about some references that I mentioned when I was giving the general properties, when I talked about this, whether all polynomial systems of this form can come from a reaction network, the existence of positive steady states, so whether a system is consistent. This other block is from yesterday's lecture and some other approaches that I did not have time to talk about on multi-stationarity, but if somebody is interested, there's many other directions. Some of them through reducing the networks, removing parts of the network and looking at sub-networks and these kind of things. These are the references on absolute concentration robustness and dimension here. Thank you.
Question. Dr. Iqbal, any question from your side?
Yeah, there is Abbas. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Beatriz, for your nice lecture. I have a general question. My question is that assume that we solve the first problem and second problem for a system. How you can you interpret translate the result for the original network?
Which result, sorry, which problem you're referring to, the
For
dimension?
example, the problem 1 and problem 2 in your
Yeah, problem 1 was the
lecture.
dimension.
And how you interpret, let we solve the problem 1 for a system, right? And how you translate the result in the original dynamic.
Well, there are several consequences that this has. For instance, there is this network, the big network that I showed, the one with several components. So this allows us to say, no, for this network, you cannot find infinitely many steady states in each irreducible and each compatibility class generically. This is one consequence, but there are some other consequences. There are some networks. So, for instance, weakly reversible networks with deficiency 0. This is not the case for this one, but with deficiency 0. I told you yesterday all the points are complex balance, right?
Right.
So you can see this from the structure because you only need to see that it's weakly reversible and you compute the deficiency. And then you know it's complex balance for all case. If it is complex balance for all case, then it has a non-degenerate point for some k. So only by looking at the structure, you know that in that case, there cannot be infinitely many positive steady states in any stoichiometric compatibility, in most stoichiometric compatibility classes. You know that the dimension, so the amount of steady states will be what you expect. So this you can say already from the structure of the network. I don't know if that answers your question, or it was more the other way around.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Just so I can find a precise answer to your question.
These are all questions from our side. Are there any questions from the audience? No. If this is the case, let us thank Beatriz. Beatriz, thank you very much for your wonderful lectures. Just clap for him.
Just one thing, I said it was all, but it was not all. I realized there was 2 more slides of references. Those references are for the networks that appear in the first tutorial, because asked me about them, then I found them. So you can also find them here. They are networks of interest. That's sorry.
Okay, okay.